Sturgians are a hardcore mix of Vikings and cheeky-bricky Slavs. When you get a combination like that, not many can stand up to the combined might of Sturgia. However, like all factions in Calradia, they too possess strengths and weaknesses of their own. So in this guide we're going to turn you from a simple Sturgian recruit into a great boyar general who can lead his warriors to victory against all foes no matter the odds. This guide will be useful to you whether you're fighting for or against Sturgia, or perhaps if you're building a Sturgian only army, or mix and matching your party from all corners of Calradia. Keep in mind, this Sturgian unit guide is for single player only, and since Bannerlord is still in early access, a lot of the stats are probably going to be changed. Many units have their own stats, and in some cases upgraded units actually get degraded. Before we get started, some of you asked questions on Reddit, so I'll answer those at the end of the video. First of all, we need to know what are the pros and cons of the Sturgian military. Well, we have heavy infantry with large shields that can form a shield wall to block out enemy archer fire and hold a battle line against its heavy counterparts. Excellent shock troops that rip through all types of infantry with their two-handed axes, however with poor armor and lack of shields dictates to keep them behind the main battle line to engage second or flank around enemy infantry. Keep in mind that most of your heavy infantry and shock troops come armed with javelins or throwing axes to inflict extra damage before combat begins. And always hold your shock troops behind your main line to throw all of their extra pointy bits before engaging in the melee. Druzhinnik are a heavy cavalry available to the Sturgians. However, since they hail from the elite troop tree, they are rare to come by, especially in the early stages of the game. Keep in mind they have a high upkeep cost and they also require a warhorse to get them going. And last but not least, many of the Sturgian units are equipped for skirmishing combat, allowing them to dish out extra range damage before clashing with their opponents. Well, that's all nice and dandy you say, but what are the cons of this northerner army? Well, they have a general lack of cavalry. Not counting in the Druzhinnik, their skirmishing cavalry is very poor and often not worth investing in since they're poorly equipped. Sturgian archers aren't the best. They use low-end short bows and are not available until tier 3. They don't really stand up to other factions' ranged options, but compared to Aserai, which only get access to their archers at tier 4, and Batania, who only get access to the best longbowmen in the game only through their elite tree, allows you to out-archer these factions in early stages of the game. However, in high-tier combat, they don't fare too well. There's a general lack of reliable spearmen, especially in the high tiers. What they have in tier 3 and 4 are lightly armored. Sure, they can fight against light cav, but you probably would have to bring more than it's worth it to combat heavy late tier cav. Probably going to upgrade them into tier 5 heavy infantry anyway. Unfortunately, some of their tier 4 units are currently better than their tier 5 units. Having said all that, let's have a look at their individual units and their stats. Sturgian recruits. Like many other recruits for other factions, they're poorly armed and armored, and are only good against battling looters and other recruits. If you happen to have a good few of them in your party during an encounter against higher tiered enemies, I would definitely use them as a meat shield to soak up some of the enemy fire and slow down opposing infantry's advance. Sturgian warrior. These battle-hardened meat shields that survived long enough to tell the tale are armed with slightly better armor and what is classified as a large shield that allows them to soak up 280 damage worth of enemy arrows and other ranged weapons like no tomorrow. We see slight improvement to stats, but nothing too special. I still recommend to use them as a meat shield to push battering rams during sieges, or to slow your opponent's advance, as skirmishers and archers rain hell on their front line. Sturgian soldier. These men are not armed any better than their lower tiered selves. However, they now come equipped with a spear that makes them sufficient at something, namely fighting enemy cavalry and protecting your flanks from it. They also come armed with a round shield which can soak up 20 more damage compared to the warrior. We see further increases in stats and armor except for the leg armor, which drops a little bit. Sturgian spearmen. Your tier 4 go to dedicated spearmen, the best you'll be able to field in the Sturgian army. However, their armor is lackluster and their polearm skill is very low for the task they're made for. They won't last long in a fight against other infantry of its tier, neither do they fare well against heavy cavalry. You'd have to bring more than is worth it to make them count against such foes. However, you're probably not going to do that, since their best units are just a tier away. Sturgian veteran soldier. The creme de la creme of your infantry. Armed with some of the heaviest armor Sturgian craftsmen can smith, equipped with the best one-handed axes and javelins, allowing them to rain volleys of fire upon your foe as your recruits get slaughtered by the enemy front line or trampled by their cav. These guys mean business, and will be happy to hold their line against any infantry thrown at them. However, their lack of spears puts them in danger of enemy cavalry charges. Sturgian Shock Troop. On the other side of the coin, you can opt in for Sturgian Shock Troops instead of veteran soldiers. These men aren't armored as well as the vets, but they come equipped with a mighty war razor with its 205 reach. Oddly enough, they work better at anti-cav combat than the actual job they've been trained for. Even though they're armed better than the spearmen they hail from, they aren't that much better, which is reflected in their poorer stats that indicate that you should almost always opt in for the vet soldiers. Sturgian Berserker. Backtracking to our tier 3 soldier, we can take another path if you want to field some of the best shock troops the Sturgians have to offer. The Sturgian Berserkers are a medium armored killing machine armed with a two-handed axe to chop the head off of any enemy that is unfortunate enough to drop their shield in combat. Be wary though, as their lack of shields puts them in danger of stones or arrows that will come their way. Sturgian Ulfhednar. These furries are resistant to the cold, wearing the very wolf's head they killed in a wrestling match. They don't fear anyone or anything on the battlefield, and with almost no armor and a mighty axe along with a few throwing axes, these men mean business. They're wild, they don't care whether they chop a horse, dog, potato or man. As long as there's something to chop, they'll do so with ferocity never seen on the battlefield before. The best use for these men, however, is not to upgrade them from berserkers, due to the significant drop in armor and two-handed skill which is crucial for this unit, further reinforced by the fact that they are armed with the same weapon as the berserker, and the extra upkeep cost and throwing axes just aren't worth it. Sturgian Woodman. On the other side of the Sturgian troop tree, we have those that opt out of melee combat in favor of raining death from afar upon their enemies. These men come equipped with a set of fish harpoons. Even though their armor is poorer than that of the recruits, they come equipped with a surprisingly excellent shield that allows them to skirmish against other skirmishers and protect themselves against ranged foes. Being lightly armored, they can flank around enemy positions to get a more favorable throw. I wouldn't bank on them in melee combat against other tier 2 or higher tiered units after they ran out of javelins. Hardened Brigand. Armored slightly better, this man comes with an extra pack of fish harpoons and surprisingly worse choice of shields than his predecessor. Still wouldn't count on them in melee combat against strong melee opponents though. Sturgian Hardened Brigand. Armored with medium light armor, he now comes on horseback, giving him a lot more mobility. However, after he unleashes all of his javelins, he's only left with a short sword, making him efficient only at distracting or harassing enemy archer formations away from your main troop. Sturgian Horse Raider. Medium armored and actually comes with a spear that makes him more useful at rushing down enemy formations that don't carry spears. However, the warhorse that is required to upgrade into this unit isn't worth it at all, and should probably be used on upgrading your Druzhinnik. Sturgian Hunter. If skirmishers aren't your thing, you're going to use hunters. These men have been hunting anything you can turn into a leather couch for their wooden huts deep in the forest, ranging from deers to bears. However, armed only with short bows, they're not going to do any significant damage to enemy heavy units, and fall short from their counterparts in other factions. Sturgian Archer. These men had enough of hunting wildlife in the forest and decided to join up with local garrisons and armies. They know their business, however still armed with short bows, they aren't the greatest threat to your enemy heavies. But with their medium armor that puts other tier 4 and 5 units to shame, they can stand up to enemy infantry rushing their way. Sturgian Veteran Bowman. They're not as well armored as their predecessors, going back to being lightly armored with better mobility and slightly better bow that delivers 3 extra damage. With almost doubled athletic skill, this allows them to be way more agile around the battlefield, however they're not as durable in melee combat anymore. Sturgian Warrior Son. Now heading over to the elites of the Sturgian faction, we see the Warrior Sons. They are poorly armored to the level of the recruit, however they have a nice large shield to counteract that, and once they tier up, they will be all worth it. Varyag or Viking, same thing to be honest. They shoot up from being poorly armored peasants to well armed and armored medium troops, coming with skirmishing abilities with their throwing axes. For tier 3 troops, they're definitely worth their buck and are capable on the front lines better than most. This guy has raided more Battanian villages than most. He comes with even better armor and a spear to fight off any cavalry that dares to come his way. Even though he's not the most skilled with polearms, his melee capabilities are a force to be reckoned with. Druzhinnik. These men are killing machines on the battlefield. Charge them into anything that doesn't have a spear and a horse and they emerge victorious every time. They're well armored and skilled for the job they've set out to do. You can just release them on your enemies with no need to babysit them to get your results. Druzhinnik Champion. These men are walking around with hefty 60 armor that would put some of the Vlandian surgeons and knights to shame. However, with their poor polearm skill and good for nothing bow skill, while battling Vlandian knights I suggest you dismount them to fight in the front lines. While deadly on horse with a Sturgian land spear, these guys need a bit of rebalancing. Thanks for getting to the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it, even though I had to wrestle with the audio a bit. I didn't actually mention other Sturgian troop trees like the mercenary and town garrison ones, since they're not that far off what we have in the main trees, and you wouldn't have as many of them units around in the game anyway, since the only known way for me to obtain them is to own a town for garrison units, and at that you probably want to keep them units there, and to capture mercs in battle, which doesn't happen too often, to be honest. Now I'm going to move on to the few Reddit questions that I got. Fluffer asked, I want to know how much butter they consume daily. Do higher tier units need more butter? This is crucial information for the conquest of Calradia. Indeed it is, my friend. What I found out is that no matter the tier of the unit, whether they are on horseback or not, each unit in your party consumes 0.05 food. That means that you can feed 20 soldiers with a single sack of grain or 1 unit of any food per day. Also found out that prisoners use half of that, so 0.025, essentially making it that you can feed 40 prisoners with 1 sack of grain or 1 unit of any food. Minsk17 asks, honestly a video is good, but I'd love if you included a spreadsheet or something in the description. It'd be nice to have a quick way to check a unit's stats. Yes it is, and there is a spreadsheet right in the description for you to check out. Panzo7, perhaps a value rating. I know it's subjective, but you could account for their total stats and equipment stats divided by their experience needed to upgrade to them or something. Yes, I think it's a good idea and I thought of it as well, but I was already too deep in with this video, like I had most of it completed. But next video, which is going to be on Batania, is definitely going to get a value rating if I actually come up with a way to rate them, but I have a gist of an idea because I'm going to format the video a little bit differently as well. 367. When you give Cav a horse to level up, do they use that horse or come with a troop tree one? I second the value and spreadsheet request. Well, for example, when you have Vlandia and you have your elite tree is just horsemen only, so when you're upgrading from one horse to another and it doesn't require a war horse, yeah, it doesn't take another horse out of your inventory for upgrading a cavalry into a cavalry. However, if you're upgrading infantry into cavalry, it takes a horse out of your inventory, and if you're upgrading a cavalry unit into a cavalry unit that requires a war horse, then it also snatches a war horse out of your inventory. RIP 901. Stats of weapons would be a good addition. Yes, they would be, and they're not in the video, however they are in the spreadsheet. Edit. Actually, the most high tier units only have 1 weapon loadout so far. Haven't looked into it, but I know in Warband they could have a few different weapons. Yes, some units have different loadouts. Some have various armor loadouts and various weapon loadouts, some don't. So that's why you see discrepancies in the video where some units have 26 armor and some have 8 to 11. It's just the different loadouts they have. Having said that, I bid you farewell, ladies and gents, and the best of luck on the fields of Calradia.